Good evening. Two observations. One, some of you are not in your assigned seats. Two, most of you are far back in the back row, which that seems pretty normal. Welcome to the bottom floor, those of you who usually sit on the balcony. I was in Houston, Texas this weekend, and St. Louis just landed this morning when you were having worship. I got to live stream for a bit in the airport. That was fun. But I was excited to come back to be a part of this evening. Our youth and Jeff are at Westphalia as part of the community weenie roast. But I wanted to be here to hear my friend speak and share about this journey that's been taking place kind of in front of us and around us for a long time. So I would guess I don't need to do much of an introduction for our speaker this evening, but here's my attempt. Peter Haskins has been about the work of helping people out of the depths for a long time. He helped Saren out of its depths on occasion. He serves right now at Disciples of Christ Church in Vincennes, and he also is both Jeff and I's mentor for our memory discernment process that we are about a year in. So he's very well connected to this church still, very well connected to us. They clearly are a fan of yours, which is why they're all here. I'm excited to hear the Reverend Peter Haskins this evening. Let's welcome him this evening.
Oh, wow, what a wonderful show. This is great. I just appreciate this so much. If you can't hear me, tell me to speak louder. Okay, I'll speak louder. I don't have a microphone on. I usually don't need one, but I have a big mouth, so we should be fine. So if in the back you can't hear me, just do one of those. Let's have a prayer first, shall we? Let's have a prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for our friendship. Thank you so much for your spirit, and I just thank you so much for the ministry that is going on here, and I thank you so much for the experience that I had here, and I just thank you for being here with us. Give us a sense of your presence. In Christ's name, amen. I am here to talk about this book, but I just kind of, I wanted to start off by talking about what an important place this church had in my life and in my ministry. And I think I've talked a little bit about this before. We've had different boring meetings here, with the UCC and how boring those are. But anyway, but I feel freer to do that. I've wanted to thank you. This is 2019. A lot has happened since 2015, hasn't it? So I recall being here at this church, accepting the interim position at this church at a point when the program in Vincennes, the land program, had been shut down. And it had been shut down in Vincennes at the jail, kind of out of spite by the sheriff. I can say that now because I don't care. You know what I mean? But anyway, it was shut down, partly because of my fault and partly out of spite. There were drugs that were brought into the pod there at the jail. And they came through our pod and through the trustees. There's all kinds of stuff that goes through jails. There's a lot of drugs in jails and prisons. It's really, really bad scene. So drugs came through our program, and man, the whole thing blew up. And sheriff said, hey, you're kicked out for 2 weeks. 1 to 2 weeks. Well, it ended up being, as I recall, not that I'm bitter about it, 121 days instead of 14. So I went around for 121 days thinking, I don't know if I have a job or not. I don't know if I have any ministry or not. I don't know what's really going to happen. So I began to sit there and say, I need to do something. My heart was still, as it still is, in ministry. So that's when Saren came along during that period. And in May, I started preaching here. And then by August, I was the interim here. And all of a sudden, around that time, the chief deputy gives me a text message right before a county council meeting and says, hey, by the way, sheriff wants you back in the jail. So, go back in the jail. Thank you so much, sir, blah, blah, blah. And there we go. We go back into it, right? So, this church was a literal lifeline for me. I don't know that you all realize what an important part you played in my own call to ministry. Driving over here this evening, because I drove over here, 2 or 3 times a week for 9 months. And driving over here tonight, passing all the things and all the going through Westphalia and just seeing everything. And I listened to some of the same music that I listened to back in 15. And, I just, how that is. You associate music sometimes with certain points in your life. And I just was so excited because it was such a bright spot. And you all were such a huge spot in my life at that time. Such a huge time where God said, you know what? You're going to be okay. And this whole congregation was literally God saying to me, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Because I honestly didn't know what was going to happen. So during that period of time, I really struggled with whether or not I should quit. And, it was 2015 and 16. Around the time that I was in March of 16, we had a fire. Does anyone remember that? And we had a fire, and the men's house burned down in the middle of the night, and that was horrible. But you all pitched in and helped us. You gave us over $1,000. This church did, for new mattresses and all this, everything. We had to start over. So I wasn't done yet. I wasn't yet done with this ministry, and I needed to see it through. And that's why I had to just say, I'm just going to stay in Vincennes. Plus, I had a sophomore in high school, and I said, hey, I think I might move to Linton. What do you think about that? And he said, no. So, that was pretty much the end of that. I didn't know what to do. So, that was really... And he's 18 now. He's probably going to go to USI or maybe ISU. But anyway, he's doing well. Jack and Katie and Emily all say hello. They're at a hot dog roast hayride for our church too. So that's where they're at tonight. But this church was a huge part of my call. And I mean, you have to understand, I know that maybe I don't need to speak for your current pastors, your team here, but I bet that you guys are a pretty big part of their call as well, in terms of God saying, you're okay, keep doing what you're doing. It is, these churches are rare. The church that I serve in Vincennes, it's great, everything is going well, but they're just kind of a little bit lazy. So this church always had that spark. There's a mission-mindedness there, and that's, I think, where we connected well in terms of what's going on. So, that introduction. This book took me 4 years to write. At one point, I had given up on it and said, I'm sick of it, and I don't want to talk about it anymore, and I think it was a failure. Because there are 6 people who I write about in this in terms of recovery, folks in recovery, and 3 of them have relapsed. And one of them is currently relapsing. Well, not 2. Are currently relapsing. This is tough business. Who knows someone who's in recovery or in current drug use? A lot of us, right? This is not abating in terms of the crisis with drug use. And this book that I wrote is literally meant to try to get this started in another county. I was just in Hamilton, Ohio last weekend to do a book signing and and it's a big county north of Cincinnati. And there was actually someone from the sheriff's department there. They have a 900 inmates in their jail, so it's a huge jail, right? So there's a possibility of really getting in over there and me being a mentor to them if they want to start this over there. So One of the goals of this is to start this in another community. And I know your jail is in Bloomfield. I know it's not here, but this book is a blueprint, basically, if you want to start this in your community. Because the main point of this is the first mission field that every church should have is their county jail. That's it. You don't need to go to Haiti. You don't need to go to Bolivia like I've done. You don't need to go somewhere else. And I get people frustrated when I say that because, they're missionaries and all this stuff. Your first mission field should be in your jail. First and foremost, the first place you should think of, hey, where should we go in? You should go in that jail. And not just give them a Bible study. It's not just a Bible study. So this book talks about the combination of social work and ministry. Because I get tired of being lumped in with a bunch of conservative Bible preachers who go in and say, here's the Bible, let's teach you. It's, Jesus should just handle everything and everything's fine. I don't know about you, but that's not life. And that's not smart ministry. Because you have to walk with people, right? You got to walk with them, and you got to get with them, and you got to say, you know what? Instead of taking, 200 or 300 in our minds and warehousing them, like they're going to do in Edwardsport. Anyone ever heard of Edwardsport, Indiana? Well, they're taking that junior high, and they're going to turn that into a huge drug rehab place, right? It's how American can you get? Let's take it and fill the whole thing with drug addicts, and everything's going to be fine. Come on, man, that's going to be a disaster. Excuse me, because you need to take it little steps. I tell you, there's nothing more frustrating than running a drug rehab house. We had 5 or 6 people in these houses. It's a women's house and a men's house. You want to talk about drama? You want to talk about immaturity? It's mind-blowing how frustrating it was to work with 35, 40, 45-year-old men who start acting like they were 12 and 15. Because when you get someone in recovery, you have to go back in and say, oh, well, how old were you when you started to use? There's arrested development issue, huge one. So if they started to use when they were 8 or 9 or 12 or 15, when they get in recovery, they revert back to that in terms of their maturity. So they start wanting to dress like it's, 1995 or whatever it was, and they start wanting to drive the Camaro, and they start wanting to hang out with these girls that are, 25 years younger, and they start acting like this, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you're 45 years old, you have no teeth. Come on, okay? Let's grow up here. So there's a lot of tough love with this, and one of the things that I learned how to do, I had to learn how to have a different gear in terms of my own ministry. Because I weigh about 137 pounds. So I'm going into that jail with no experience. I'm not an addict. I don't even like, I've been high one time in my life. I hated it. I've been drunk several times. I hated it. I don't do it because I don't like it. I don't take Oxycontin when I'm giving it, I don't like it. I don't like that feeling. So I go in there and I can't relate to him at all. So I had to get in there and I had to really figure out what kind of angle I was. When I started this back in 2005 in Westphalia, Indiana, and that church over there really resisted me, by the way, at first. So I'm not going to say that it was all rosy. And I put that in the book. They weren't real nice. I had to just do it. Because, this is different. You have to be creative with this and say, where's the need? I had prayer with the Brent of that title this morning at my church. I had prayer with him, okay? He's 30 years old now. He's still trying to make it, and he's doing great. But I had prayer with him, and he's still struggling. He still struggles with this. He's the reason I started it, because in 2005, in March of 2005, he ran up to the parsonage there at Westphalia, and he was running from his stepdad, who was chasing him around in a Scooby-Doo van. One of those white Scooby-Doo vans in Westphalia. He was terrified. His stepdad was high on meth, and he was riding around trying to find him. He was mad at him. And I sat there and I said, all right, what am I going to do with this kid? What am I going to do with this? I've got to apply ministry to the situation that I'm in. So could I go back and just sit there and say, well, let me just continue to work on my sermon here. Let's just, you'll be okay. I'll pray for you, Brent. Man, I'm not going to just pray for him. You got to get out there and you got to systematically say, how are we going to help him? Where's the problem here? And the problem is, when these folks get incarcerated, they get left. They just get left. They get abandoned in these jails. There are 740,000 people in a county jail right now. 740,000 people in a county jail across this nation. There are 3,238 county jails. Think about that. And 2/3 of all those people in those jails are pre-trial. You know what that means? When you get arrested and they file the paperwork within 48 hours, you're stuck. And you get to have one arraignment, and then in Knox County, I don't know how it is here, you sit there. You sit there for about 8, 9, 10, 11 months and hear nothing. It's all pre-arraignment. And this goes on all across the United States. So, you get kids, 18, 19, 21, 25 years old, who get caught with a little pot, or possession, or visiting a common nuisance, which is at the wrong place at the wrong time. And they get caught up in something. And guess what? The poor people in our country do not have any advocates. So if you can't bond out, you're stuck. You can't. The rich kids or the kids that have the parents that can afford it will get the lawyer. They'll get bonded out. And they'll go to court. They'll give them probation. Blah blah blah. And then there you go. But the other people sit there, and they're subject to an incredibly violent, and to me, it's a violent and horrific place to be to survive. And I spent a decade in there watching this. And not only that. I mean, there are 2.3 million people in prison or jails in this country. So 1 out of 99 Americans is incarcerated right now. So, and 1 out of 47 are in some type of probation or parole. So then when you look at the environment in a jail and then in a prison, and we need to talk about this. It's amazingly racist. Especially when you go into prison. If you go into prison, you have to choose a side. And that side is, you're white, you're black, or you're Latino. And that's it. And if you don't choose one of those sides, you are pummeled. Okay? And you're just a castaway. So, we get all of these people get caught up in things on the local level. Then they get sent up to prison. They get indoctrinated in all of this racist stuff. And then you get them sent out into our society. And you wonder why we have racist issues in our country. We have issues in our country because we have a pipeline to racism right from the jails and the prisons. So we're having issues with racism because it starts at this level. And to me, I think if we really, and this is one of the premises in the book, if we want to heal our nation, if we really do, we start at this. And every local jail needs to get people in there ministering to them and saying, all right, let's come out. I'm going to walk with you. And that's what we did. And I'm telling you what, to this day, I still have groups of land people come to my house and we have meals. I still have people stopping by the house. I see people all over Vincennes stop me. People from Lamb come to church. And the people who, usually they're either doing really good or really bad when they talk to me. But I've seen this work. the recidivism rate for the program was about 40%, 35 or 40%. Comparatively, without it, it's about 66, 64%. So we took it from 6 out of 10 not making it. Recidivism means within a 3-year period, do you go back? So 6 out of 10 go back. We had it about 3.5 or 4 out of 10. This stuff works. One of the things that I do want to mention is that each community that I go to, there's such a need here. Can anyone answer the question in terms of what's going on in your local jail in Bloomfield? Does anyone know what kind of ministry goes on? Anything that you know of? Does anybody know of anything? Yes?
Greene County Literacy was going on.
Literacy program? Okay. That's good. We actually had a literacy program a little bit through our library. We had tutors coming in. Let me tell the story. I went to the Greene County Chamber of Commerce one time. Greene County, Bloomfield. Okay. And I was a little bit of a smart aleck. Let me just tell you that story. Imagine that, right? So, went there, and it was like, 25 people there, and they have this, anyone been to this big theater or something there in Bloomfield? Anyway, went there. And I got up, and there were just a few people there, and I said, so what kind of programming do you have in your jail? And one woman she had a bun on her head, she had jean skirt. She said, well, you have a Bible study. And I said to myself, should I say it? And I said to myself, yes, I'm going to say it. I said, you know what? I don't think that a community can call itself Christian unless you've got a program in your jail, and it's not just a Bible study. You have to get in there and offer a 12-step program along with the faith-based. The 12-step part of this is huge. Has anyone ever worked the steps? The 12 steps. The 12 steps are an amazing spiritual tool. The 12 steps, I highly recommend them, especially that 4th and 5th. You do a moral inventory, and you write down all the people you resent. You think about that. And that's what we would do with them. One by one, we took people and we said, all right, here are the steps. List all the people you have hurt. List all the people who have hurt you. And then list a gratitude list, the things you're thankful for. And then share it with a total stranger. Addicts who do the steps are extremely courageous. Because in order to do that, you have to have you have to examine this life. You have to examine your life. So the program that we had there, and the thing that I want to get it in another community, is this idea that this is a spiritual program as well. So it's not just, hey, stop doing drugs. It's more than that. Well, where's God at in your life? Have you ever had God? Have you ever had a concept of God? And the reason the 12 steps were such a huge part of this was because the 12 steps just talk about higher power. And we got a lot of criticism. I got a lot of criticism from the conservatives in our community because they would say, well, this is pagan and the 12 steps are not Christian. I'm telling you, I've met some people that have been so hurt by God that they can't even say God's name. Right? They said, don't talk to me about God. Why is that? Because the person who abused them was their stepdad minister. Right? Or someone at church, in the name of God, had molested them. And then they got on Ritalin because they were acting out. And Ritalin is another form of methamphetamine, and there you go. So at 5 years old, it starts. You don't want to talk about God? So every person that you're dealing with is this civil war inside them. I love that image. Charles actually told me about that the whole image of every person is this civil war, and you've got this battle going on. So when you go into the jail and you talk with someone, and it's such a privilege to be able to ask them, are you ready to quit? Are you ready to quit now? Are you ready to give this up? Are you ready to say, I'm done fighting? Of the people that you know who are suffering from addiction issues, how many of them just are just begging for help? And they've had something happen to them. And that something that happened to them is so deeply buried within them that it takes sometimes years to begin to uncover this. I remember the guy I talked about a lot in the book, William Hubie. He had a rap sheet 36 pages long. And when I got to him, he in the jail, he was about 45 or so, and he was a repeat offender so much that he was sent to prison. The judge had to send him to prison for 4 years. But, he would get in jail and be a trustee, and he would even, it's just some of the stuff, some of the things that I heard in there. It's just weird. But he would even drink some of the cleaning fluid because of the alcohol content in it. But he was injured when he was young. He was hurt when he was young. And your jail is filled with people. Your jail is filled with walking dead, literally. With boys and girls who are just asking for help. And I want to encourage you as a church. I know you've got a lot of good things going on. But there are people suffering in that jail that don't need to be suffering. There are people in that jail that are asking for help that don't have anyone to help them. Because this church does a really good job of walking beside people when you do ministry. You're very hands-on. So, as you think about what's going on with you and where your church fits into this community, I want to encourage you to look at that. And this book is a blueprint. There's one section in there in terms of what you need to do in order to organize it. We had to organize it, first of all, with the sheriff. Who's your local sheriff? Anybody know what the name of your sheriff is? Andy Griffith?
Mike Hassler is his name.
What's his name?
Mike Hassler.
Mike Hess.
Mike Hassler.
Mike Hassler. Okay? His name is Hassler. There's your guy. Because he's the one that says, hey, yes or no. And then you talk to your county council. We got support, financial support from the county council. One of the things that I hated about Liam was because I had to go around and do fundraising. I'm a preacher. I don't like to do fundraising. I don't like to ask for money. But I had to go in front of these politicians and say, would you support us with money? And I would say, well, it's costing your county to house one person. You know how much it costs for one person in your county jail? At $35 a day? $12,800 to house one person. So, if you even get 3 or 4 of those out, and get them out of the jail and get them functioning and paying taxes and working, and not, bootlegging and all kinds of stuff that they do, and get them civilized, you're saving your county money. I mean, it made total sense, and that's why still the land program is still going in Knox County, and they're still being funded. I mean, our county in Knox County gives $77,000 to the land program. And I remember going and being so nervous every year, having to ask for that money every year. It had to be, continued each year. And then we would have the banquets, and you guys have come to the banquets before. And that's what it takes. We would have 1/3 of all the churches involved in this ecumenical ministry there. And we would have the politicians and the people from law enforcement. And the whole community has to do it. So we had people from the conservative churches and the liberal churches saying, this is not about politics. This is about people who are suffering. And that is the exciting thing. One of the reasons I started LAM was because there were people who were hurting and they weren't getting help. That's why I started it. Because that Brent kid comes up to the house and I didn't know what to do for him. I don't know, I bet your pastor, I bet JD's saying, hey, if there's a need, let's learn how to fill it. Let's learn how to address this. And that's what you have to do. So, I think I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Any questions? Yes.
You deal with alcoholism as well as drugs?
Yes. Yes. Alcoholism, to me, the only time I was ever threatened was with someone who had been drinking Scope. And I remember he had like 5 or 6 bottles of Scope. He was drunk on Scope. Hey, he's an alcoholic, right? Scope. Oh yeah, mouthwash. And then he got some vodka. Alcohol is the devil. To me, alcohol is the worst of all the drugs. It just is. I'm scared to death of alcoholics. I hate dealing with alcoholics. You give me a good old-fashioned meth addict, and I'll be just fine. I'd have had to deal with that guy, no problem. The other real issue, the other big one, is our opiates. I'm doing a talk at VU next month on opiates at this lecture series because it continues to be a huge deal, and you hear that in the news, with Purdue Pharma, right? If you ever want to read anything or hear anything that's really disgusting about the greed, the Sackler family, you listen to a podcast or any kind of documentary about that. It's horrible what they've done. And they've gotten people addicted. So, I don't know what the drug choice is right now in Greene County or in Linton, but in Vincennes, heroin has made a comeback because of the opiates. Because opiates are synthetic heroin. The CVS in Vincennes, Indiana, a couple years ago, gave out more prescriptions for hydrocodone and oxycodone than any other CVS in the world at Vincennes, the one on Hart Street. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts. The amount of pills. It's so easy to get opiates in Vincennes. I don't know how it is here, but there are a couple doctors. One of them's gone now, but there have been a couple that you can just tell them, hey, yeah, my back hurts. And pills are really bad because of one thing. You can't just hibernate like a meth addict. If you're a meth addict and you've been if you're on meth, you could take a shot of meth and be up for 4, 5, 7 days at a time. I knew a guy that had been up on meth for 41 days. 41 days, okay? That means he kept taking meth. He would get a cat nap in once in a while. He was up for 41 days. And then he got to jail, and what do when you're a meth addict and you're coming off of it? You sleep like a baby. You sleep for 3 or 4 days, okay, in jail. But if you're an opiate addict, you have seizures. You have some major flu-like symptoms with opiate withdrawal. And I've seen people flop out, seize out on the reckyard there in Knox County. It's some serious, you have to come down real slow. It's real dangerous. So that's one of the problems with opiates. I mean, you've got people in Vincennes I know who have to have 45 Oxycontin every day. Or 50 Xanax every day at $5 a pill. I mean, think about that. Think of how much money that you have to raise every day to supply. So you're talking $400 to $500 a day that you have to raise. And with opiates, when you're taking them, you commit crimes that you don't even remember. A lot of people would come in jail and would be arrested, and the only reason they're arrested is because they were on film, you know, and they don't have any recollection of anything that happened. One guy woke up, he was in the middle of a music store on downtown Vincennes, and I don't think he had a lot of clothes on. And he was playing guitar. He just woke up. He was there. Didn't have any recollection of how, but he's on film. So, yesterday, Emily and I had to go to chaperone a middle school Halloween dance. That is very entertaining to do that, by the way. Okay? And I had an evil clown mask, and I stood there, and they thought I was a mannequin, which is great. So that has nothing to do with the story. But anyway, before we went to this party at the middle school, Jack, who's now 9, comes in and he goes, "Come here." There's a guy out in front of our house, right? And he's screaming. He's got a bag of something. He's just going around and he's pointing and cussing and screaming. And my son's like, "Hey, you know, go out there or do something." And I'm not going out there. And I said to him, I said, "This is what it is. That's probably bath salt. Have any of you ever heard of bath salt? Bath salt is horrific. I could go on for days talking about this. But bath salt is a synthetic drug that mimics meth. But it has 7 ingredients that you can order online from who knows where, okay? I'm just telling you, you don't want to know where these drugs come from because you order them in 7 different packages, and they have 5 different stages of hallucinations and euphoria and all these different stages. And then, so these people get these bath salts together and they mimic them, and people are nuts on these. That's an issue. There's K2, which is a huge issue. K2 is there are 44 different kinds of synthetic marijuana that this was sponsored by the U.S. government. This wasn't during the Korean War. So K2 comes from government testing. And this book actually has a section in there that talks about drugs and warfare by a guy named Kamiensky, and I really enjoyed writing this section because it talks about how every war that we've ever had has a drug of choice, and every country has a drug of choice. So in the United States, when you go back to the Civil War, it was opium. Hard. Laudanum, opium, all that. And then when you get to World War II, guess what the drug was in World War II? Amphetamines and methamphetamines. So you've got Japan, huge amount of methamphetamines. The United States, after they realized during the Blitzkrieg that Germany was able to conquer more territory in 4 days than they did in World War I in 4 years, which is what happened because those German soldiers were on methamphetamine. They didn't need to sleep, they didn't need to eat, and they were like animals. That's how they did that. So it wasn't just, hey, these good old German soldiers are out there really fighting hard. No, they were high. They were tweaking. That's what they call it. They were tweaking. So the United States in 1942 begins to mass produce amphetamines for U.S. soldiers. So then you get all these soldiers coming back, 1946, they're meth addicts. And then Korean War. Man, yeah, Korean War is you've got opium, or heroin was a huge deal. And then Vietnam was just everything, but mostly heroin. So, there toward the end of the war in 1975, you get probably about 1,000 soldiers a day returning to the United States. And half of them, at least half of them, are addicted to heroin. So, you see, one of the things I wrote about in this book is how were the outside historical things, how did they impact Vincennes, Indiana? Right? How did World War II impact us? How did Korea impact us? When did methamphetamine get, it started in Southern California with the biker gangs in the 80s. And it came up through Southern California, came up through Missouri, through I-70, and that's how we got it. But they started making money with producing this, and they made a lot of money. And they still are, these gangs. But we were innocent in terms of, when I was growing up, we just had marijuana and alcohol, a little bit of cocaine, right? I mean, we didn't have a whole lot, and we didn't have cell phones, thank goodness. It was a simpler life, and then all of a sudden, the late 90s, bam, that's when it hit, the late 90s. So by the time 2005 hit, and Brent came up to my house, it was a full fire. The house was on fire, literally. But that, to me, I love going back into history of that and seeing, and I talk about that in a nutshell, just all the impacts of the history that, decisions that were made far, far away impacted us, and they're still impacting us. And they impact people in that jail, and the people sitting in the Greene County Jail are impacted by history. Any other questions? Yes.
With your 12-step programs, did you just have one 12-step program regardless of what the drug of choice was, or did you separate them out?
One.
Just one?
We had tons of different books on it in terms of how to apply it, but the sponsee relationship was key within the jail setting. Getting to that fourth step by the time they graduated out, and just a big, big advocate of the 12-step program. I like to teach it at my church because there's just so much that we could all do if we did what's called a moral inventory. If we sat there and really wrote down the things that have hurt us, and that we have also hurt others, and write all those down, and then when you get to step 8, 9, you begin to sift through the ones that you need to call, or you need to write, or you need to visit, and you need to say you're sorry. And then the burden that is lifted when you speak it. When you just say, I did this, or this happened to me, and I've never told anyone about this. And there's a preciousness about a jail. I love it because people are so hungry for release from this, and they're hungry for God. They're eager to sit there and say, yes, I need a lifeline. Jailhouse Jesus, I love Jailhouse Jesus. I have no problem with religion in a foxhole, you know what I'm saying? When it gets tough and people go to God when they're in trouble, that's fine. Because at least they're listening at that moment. The key is surrounding them so that they keep that going. God's got their attention because they have reached the end. They have nowhere to go but up. And that pain threshold, we don't change unless we're threatened, unless we're in pain, unless something happens to us that says, oh, am I going to survive? That's when God has gotten my attention. I'll just speak in I statements. That's when God has gotten my attention. When it's like, oh my God, am I going to survive this? Oh, the sheriff kicked us out of jail. Am I going to survive this? I got to really start looking. What am I going to do? Let's go. Then you start thinking. Then you start reaching out. You start reaching out. I reached out to you all, and you were there for me. Good things happen when you're at the bottom. Right? They do. Great things happen to me. The only time I've ever learned in my life is when I have been a complete failure. Bam. Done. I'm out. And I have to say, hey, can I have some help? Those people are in your jail. those people, you reach a hand out and you say, can I help you? Man, that kind of ministry to me is just fabulous. I loved it. Even though I never want to do it again, I kind of miss it. You know what I mean? I kind of miss that excitement because you kind of felt like you're on the front lines. Kind of felt like you were right in there and just you got to go in there. And you know, I could speak all day about it, but the amount of loyalty that I have to and from all those folks in that program is amazing. When you reach out to people who are that no one else has reached out to, and you go in there and you say, "Hey, I'm going to help you," and you really mean it, though you've got a friend for life. If there's ever a zombie apocalypse, man, I got like a dozen people. You're on my team. Let's go. It's wonderful people. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
When you say you go into the jail to help these people, these addicts, specifically, what do you do?
You ask them if they're ready to quit, and if they are, if they're ready to be humbled enough to get some help. It's that simple. You get them in, you have a program ready to go, which is what we had, the 12-step program, and you say, all right, we're going to start meeting. But one of the great things about the Oxycontin jail early on was we had our own separate pod. The Oxycontin jail was it was half of a wagon wheel. One of them was a women's pod, and we had one full pod there at the beginning for several years. So we had one section. So we were able to actually do a little bit of sociology with it in creating a new community in a violent setting. I love that, and I talk about that in the book. I love that whole sense of you go into a really rough place and say, let's try to create a new community here, right, with these 12 guys or 15, and to see that organically be created in that setting where there's usually just violence and manipulation and survival. That's what you do. You got to get people when they're down and say, "Are you ready? Is this hurting enough?" Because I mean, you know, you've got so many people in jail are missing so much stuff with their kids and their families and just all kinds of things. So I actually have a YouTube channel named Peter Haskins. Not very creative, but I've just started adding videos on that, and that's one of the things. How do what do you do when your son's in jail? What do you do? How do you get to people? You get to them at rock bottom. And that's the 12 steps. I mean, the very first step is, my life is unmanageable and everything is chaos. Anybody know it? Anybody who's going through complete chaos? I mean, you see them in the school with the kids, and you can see when their parents are going through complete chaos. And Christians, we have to reach out to the people who are here. We don't need to go to another country. They're right here. That's my whole thing. They're sitting right in front of me.
You talk about, talking to the addicts. Do you do much work with their families?
Really good question. Yeah, they're toward the middle part of that 10 years. We got those housing. We got the 2 houses. And that's where we started really working with the kids. We worked with CASA, and we worked with DCS, and really worked with the courts in going in and advocating for them. I did a lot of time sitting, in courtrooms with people and saying, hey, I'm going to vouch for this person. But one of the things that the houses did, especially the women's house, was connected the moms with the kids. The very first, we had May 31st of 2013 is when we had our women's house open, and that Christmas, all of a sudden, the moms, the 5 moms, and they were like, well, can we have our kids come over for Christmas Eve? So the kids started to come over and spend time with their moms. Do you know what that did to me? That was amazing to me to see that, because I didn't expect that. So we got to facilitate a reunion of these moms with their babies. And they got to have Christmas together. And they had Christmas dinner, and we got them presents. And the other churches started to say, all right, let's sponsor these kids and let's get them presents and bam, bam. And you just see this ministry being created around this. But to me, I look at some of these kids and I see them around town. And I know it works. Because I see them with their parents now. And this stuff it's so exciting because in ministry it's so difficult for us to see results. You know what I mean? Because we do stuff and we're like, hey, I'll pray for you. Okay. But you know, this is like, oh, look at that. They're together. They're together. And to see that, man, it's amazing. It's amazing. I just can't tell you what that did for me. So just knowing that happened was worth the whole thing for me. All right, good question. Anything else?
What you just said is kind of close to the question I wanted to ask you anyway. What changed about you from day one walking in that jail to the last day you walked out?
Can you repeat the question, Peter?
What changed for me from day one to the day that I left the jail? I saw God take an impossible situation, which was starting a program that I didn't know how to do, and led me through it, led me to the right people, and gave me a real sense of hope that ministry happens in all different places, and you just have to be open. When I was in 2007, Dylan was just going into kindergarten, and his mom, we were divorced, his mom lived in Vincennes, and I lived in Westphalia, and he was getting ready to go into kindergarten, so I was miserable at Salem.
I was miserable.
Okay. So I remember talking to my mom and saying, you know what I really want to do? I want to move to Vincennes and I want to be with Dylan when he starts school. And I remember verbalizing that to her. And I quit that job and I moved to Vincennes without a job. Okay? And I'm bragging because it worked. God worked this all out. I moved in the summer of 7. We had $6,000 left in land. So I started writing grants. And if you've ever written a grant, you know there is a hell. Because grant writing is horrible, it's boring, blah, blah, blah. I hated it. But I wrote grants. By the December of 7, when we were down to our last $1,000, and I didn't know what I was going to do, we got a $100,000 grant. Okay? And jumping out without a net was the greatest experience of my life. And if I really learned anything, it's just that sense that, you know, when I jumped and I said to God, I'm doing this is crazy. I'm 39 years old. What am I doing this for? I met Emily by October. I was married in another year. You know, all these things opened up, but it was because I said, I'm going to trust you, God. Are you real? I mean, it's just that whole sense of just saying to God, you've acted through Scripture. You've acted through history. Now it's my turn to act. I'm going to act like there's no net there. And there wasn't any net, but it worked. That's the most exciting part for me personally, was just that my faith worked. It functioned for me. It wasn't just something in seminary or a book. It worked for me. And guess what? I shared that. And I shared everything I had with those people in that jail. And I talked to them about my divorce. I talked to them about my life. And I shared everything with them. And I said, here I am. If God's going to give everything, so am I. And that's how you got to live. You got to do ministry like, I'm giving everything I got. I'm going to give you everything I got. And that's what I did. And that's what that book says. I gave everything I had and then just left it there. And said, this is it. Yes?
Another question. Did you ever worry about your own personal safety or the fact they knew who you were, they knew where you lived, they know your family?
I still do a little bit.
Like you want to help
Yeah, did I ever fear for my safety? Yes, there's one guy in particular. We started to get some people out of prison there for a while. The commissioner of the Indiana Department of Corrections was involved with us for a little bit, and he gave us some real rotten apples, right? So this one guy who was drinking scope, man, I mean, he had a knife, and I was really worried. And everybody else, he's like, basically, I'm going to kill you. And everybody else is like, oh, that's nothing, don't worry about it. He just said he was going to kill me. They were all just like, it's no big deal. That really bothered me. So anyway, he didn't kill me though. And he came to me about a year later with his new girlfriend and apologized to me. Like, I'm sorry I tried to kill you. But, I mean, it is. It's a little bit disconcerting because you see people around town and you don't, because I tell you what, I yelled at people, I screamed at them, I got in their face, I cussed, I got into it. I mean, I did a Bobby Knight one time. I got so mad at this one guy, I threw a chair in the pod, and it was this plastic chair, right? And I took this chair, and I went, bam, and I threw it down the hallway toward the bathroom. And man, that chair careened down the hallway. This is legendary. It careened down the hallway and landed upright in the corner, ready for someone to sit in. And I was like, I'm out. And I just walked out. But anyway, I got into it because I said to them, and this is what I said to this a lot. Why am I more excited about your recovery than you are? There's something wrong with this when I'm more intense about your own recovery and your own life and your kids than you are. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And people would come to our groups after, our support groups. We had support groups at work release. And this one woman said, I just feel like I'm, good mom and everything's going really good and I'm a good mom and I'm a good mom and blah, blah, blah. And I just sat there and I just said, I'm not going to shut up. So I said, you're not a good mom, Stacy. You're a horrible mom. You've abandoned your kids so many times. Man, she got so mad at me. But it's speaking the truth to her. Because when you're talking about addictions, you've got a disease here. And you've also got the person over here. When I got mad at them and I cussed and I yelled at them, I'm yelling at the disease that's trying to destroy them and trying to destroy our community. I love this person over here. I want to find this person and lead them back to their family. But this disease is willing to give up, wanting to destroy this person and allow them to give up everything they have. And you got to get in there and fight because this is a real demonic thing that got going on. There's a demonic presence. One of the things that I had to worry about a lot in the jail was really being prayed up because there was a lot of toxic stuff in that jail. And there toward the end of my ministry there, I started to bring that stuff home. And it got to me. And it was impacting how I parented. And especially with Katie. And one of the reasons I quit, and I told her this, I said, I'm quitting because I'm not a very good dad right now. And I'm not going to sit here and have you go through high school and then say, Dad was a real jerk during all that time and he cared more about his job. I'm not going to do that. I was not going to do it. It impacted me. And sometimes in ministry, sometimes in life, you just have to back off and say, I'm done. This is too much. So I really did. I just brought it home. I brought it home with me. And it's just mind-boggling how after 10 years you're just like, why can't you do this? Why is this still, and I would get too caught up in it. I had to protect myself.
One of the things that you and I have talked about via email with respect to the contents of the book is how important it is to shape your kids away from this threat and how important it is to start early. And the thing that amazed me was how early you need to start.
By the time you get to junior high, what do you have, middle school or junior high here? is a middle. So by the time you get to 6th grade, it's too late. I mean, you really need to start in elementary school, and you need to get in there and really address these issues of addiction early on, because that's, the average age, the onset age of use for guys was 12 and for girls was 13. So I mean that's average. So you've got 6, 7, 8 years old on some of that stuff. So you have to start young, because we've got a couple neighborhoods in Vincennes that are just riddled with it. The North End, Bunker Hill. You've got places around here, right? I'm sure you've got areas that are just riddled with it. That's it. They see stuff. These kids see stuff, and they're people are changed. Their DNA is changed when they're around trauma. Trauma changes people. It really does. We're talking PTSD or whatever, but man, that's where my heart would just go out to people, because you just sit there and you just say, let's get you back. Just like with Brent, let's get you back. I mean, he's still struggling after 15 years of how to get through that abuse. And how do you do that? It's just, you got to walk with people. You got to walk with them, and you got to have a core group that surrounds people with, and that's what we worked hard at. We help people find jobs. We help people find housing. We help people get through benefits, all that stuff. Try to get them to start bank accounts. They would never start a bank account because they had so much debt, especially medical debt at hospitals. What do you do? I mean, if you can't go to a bank and start a checking account because your creditors are going to take all your money or child support, and you're going to, I mean, how many of us would do okay with all of our money on us constantly with no bank? I mean, that's how it is. Their pockets, that's their bank. So what do you do? There's no going to the banks. So there's just the ins and outs of this. And I talk about this, just the intricacies of it. You get into the detail, you look under the hood, however you want to see it. It's really complicated. And that's why you have to go person by person. So it's not just, hey, here's a Bible study, and let's pray for you. It's a lot more complicated than that. Yes?
I'm guessing this is legal at a certain point, any of these addictions. What's the average life expectancy on someone that just keeps it up?
I don't know of any certain age in terms of that, but I mean, nothing past 55 or 60. I mean, I've known several people who've already died in their 30s and 40s. They're just gone. So, there's a guy the other day that caught another charge, and he drove his car into a big oak tree out there. It's on 61 going out South Knox. So, you just see it, and that's just an accident. I know what happened. I mean, he got another charge. He wasn't going back to prison. He's not going back to prison. So, just all kinds of stuff. But yeah, life expectancies.
If in the event that there's somebody sitting here who came to this conversation because they know someone or they love someone who's in the throes of this, what's their first step?
Their first step is reaching out to that person, seeing if where they're at in terms of if they're at rock bottom. Because if trying to talk to someone who's not at rock bottom is just wasting your time. You have to see where they're at, see if they're open to going to a 12-step group. You have 12-step meetings here still?
No, not in this church.
Not in this church. There are meetings around here. That's the best thing is the 12-step program. But here's the other thing. The best thing for them is to get arrested. I mean, that's the sad part about it. So one of the most salvific things for us was like, well, I hope he just gets arrested. Because it puts them in timeout. Now, there are drugs in the jail, but at least it gets them off the streets Yeah, being arrested. Because guess what? In about 7 o'clock, in about 3 hours, that's when people start coming out in Linton, Indiana, who are addicts. If you stay out long enough, about 10:30 or 11, that's when people start getting on their BMX bikes and their mopeds, and they start roaming around. That's the same in every community. And I have a video on that on the YouTube. It's because, and I know this is it because someone told me this in the program. They said, we never wanted to actually be up and be awake during the day with all you normal people because we didn't feel included. We roamed around and we slept all day, but we roamed around at night so that we wouldn't have to see you. They don't feel included. They don't feel like coming to church. They don't feel like putting a shirt on and trying to be known. This isn't their thing because they don't feel included. And, I struggle with that with our church, Our church really struggles with that when we have new people come in. Are you going to be friendly to folks that look different? Not always. But that's just how it is. We tend to ostracize them. But that's why they roam around. There's a whole other world that goes on while we're asleep. It's crazy. We had a fire at a drug house across the street from us last week. Our house, 6 in the morning. I heard kids screaming, babies screaming, and there was a big fire. It happens right there with us. I've started picking up trash around our neighborhood. I picked up 6 bags of trash in the 3 blocks. I go on walks, and now I start picking up trash. I started picking up trash because I'm a Democrat, but I started picking up trash. I'm just kidding. Because I found syringes in the parking lot next to our house. I got kids. Syringes. There's bags of stuff. There's just all drugs. There's this little area behind our house. So I started looking around. There it is. There's a syringe right there. I was like, Jack, don't touch it. Don't get Hep C, don't touch it. There's just all kinds of stuff. So I started looking around. There's trash everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff in our streets around Vincennes. Vincennes is filthy. Vincennes is a filthy town. There's trash everywhere. It's amazing. I think Linton actually is a lot cleaner. Vincennes, you just go down some streets, it's just garbage. But there's drug garbage there. That's not acceptable to me. It's not acceptable. My kids have to live in that third world kind of atmosphere. It's just not. We don't have to live that way. That to me is just out of bounds. And that's where I'm just like, nope. You've got to do something about stuff like that. You got to reach out. You got to say, let's put a stop. Because if we don't put a stop to that, who is? Just wait for the next big rain to happen, and hopefully the syringes will wash down into the Wabash River. And that's what we're doing. Just hope it washes away. But not wash away. Any other questions? My stomach is growling. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We would like to invite all of you to the fellowship hall. There's a small reception happening there. Peter's going to be signing books. I know for a fact there are deviled eggs. And what was the other thing? There was another thing too.
Gluten-free cookies.
There you go.
Are you kidding?
So, take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Please join us down in the fellowship hall. We appreciate you.